We're not concerned.
All right, we are live again. And look, it's late. You might be wondering why. Well, we thank you for joining us, first of all. Second of all, we want you to know that because we're technicians and we usually have busy lives and we're trying to do this on our own time and build this community, we were stuck adding things and getting things ready right before the show. And this is an important topic that we're going to cover today about production. We're going to be covering some of the comparisons between what to do, what not to do, and why doing what we just did today, including myself, is not always the best idea right before production. But I want to thank my cohorts for joining me today. We have Colin. We have just about everybody that you could possibly want is on our screens today. All right. There we go. I've lost my assistant for today, so I'm doing all the switching. So bear with us as we get through this. And this is going to be another important lesson when it comes to this topic of production. And as you notice, we have a fifth person with us today, Mr. Kyle Alexander. And we're going to invite him to open us up with prayer since we are a church AV professional organization.
All right, let's pray. Dear God, we thank you for this day. We thank you for life. We don't want to take for granted any of the blessings that you have allowed us and just the mental space that we have to even have this conversation and the technology that you have blessed us with. So just guide this conversation, help it to be uplifting and helpful for us and for everybody watching, and may your name be lifted up. We pray in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Now, normally I start out with a little bit of a story. I like anecdotes. I like to show the practical application for the things we're doing here. But today's not my day. Our brother Alex here came up with this idea about covering production, about really talking about, as we open back up, what are the benefits over production, recording prior to an event, or doing like a live Zoom like we're doing right now. We are all live. This is all 100%. We're all in the flesh. And there are drawbacks, there's pros and cons to each one. But I'm going to put Alex on the hot seat today and let him take over and sort of explain why he chose this subject. And then I'll have my anecdotes later.
Oh, this is easy. This is so easy to pass the hot seat. I basically text out Kyle one day because it's been a while. And I was like, hey, what are you up to? And then he responds, well, I've been busy. We're doing pre-recorded services and we're doing a bunch of video. And, you know, we're having these. Well, I actually don't have to say anything. I'll just have Kyle explain his circumstances and I'll just throw the ball to him. So hot seat deferred. Hot seat deferred, sir.
What kind of hot potato hot seat is this? Yeah, so Alex reached out and I mentioned that we are full on pre-produced. We actually did our first live panel discussion this past Saturday, but it was Saturday afternoon instead of the morning. So it was 2 programs in a day instead of 1. So yeah, we've been fully pre-produced since March. I think it was 1 week that we did live at the church before everybody really knew what was going on with just you know, the band, the pastor. And after that, I think it was 2 weeks of the pastor at his house and me trying to walk him through how to stream live on our channel from his laptop over Wi-Fi, spotty internet, and thank God we made it through. But since then, we've been fully pre-produced, meaning how much detail do you want me to go into right now?
I mean, you're in the hot seat, so you can decide, but as much as you'd like, sure.
Which roughly means for us is that everybody sends their videos to, records their videos at home using their phone or whatever they have, sends it to a common place. And right now we have a team of 3. Our AV team is bigger than that normally, but because of the circumstances, the technology that people have access to, and the know-how for this particular type of thing, video editing and stuff like that, we've been kind of whittled down to 3, myself and my wife and another lady from the church. So that's been interesting, just kind of juggling that around amongst all of the other, as I assume you guys have talked about, other kind of communication AV duties, monitoring Zoom calls for people's prayer lines and figuring out how to connect people in different ways and making graphics. And so it's been quite a journey, but everybody sends their clips. We do the editing, edit the audio to make sure it looks as good as possible, sounds as good as possible, get music piped in as well, and we've been pre-recording, and we stream it. I stream it live from my computer on the day, but I'm streaming a pre-recorded thing. So that's what we've been doing. I'm passing this hot seat.
Well, there are a couple of things that I wanted to identify in that. So, what I heard was, first of all, your team is larger, but it's gotten down to a skeleton crew. That is a commonality, I think, that we can relate to in certain terms. We, for the longest time for our service, we were running, I think we did 11 or 12 weeks straight running a 3-man crew kind of thing. That's kind of one of the things I wanted to tease out of this conversation. You had mentioned to me about, the quality and the skill set. So, what are you guys editing? Final Cut, Premiere, Resolve? What are you using?
We're using Resolve. The other lady that I mentioned is a Mac person, and I am not nothing against Mac. I've just never had anything besides iOS devices. So she is familiar with Final Cut Pro, and I use various programs to get done what I do. So I decided that I think Resolve was something that we could potentially work on the same thing on both platforms. So we've been using Resolve, and she's been open to trying to learn that, which is difficult to request that of her because she's very busy and has a lot of things to do, and learning a new software, is kind of a big jump. Even though Resolve is pretty good at kind of matching some of the shortcuts, and there's different things you can do. So we've been the past number of weeks consistently, we've been using Resolve, and I'll use Reaper to do video on the side to prepare certain things, but Resolve has been what we've been using.
Now with Resolve, are you using Resolve Studio or the free version?
Free. Everything as free as possible. Pretty much everything we've done at this church has been the free tier as much as possible.
That's understandable. Yeah. Rob, hot potato to you.
So we do a mix of live, and most of our service is live Zoom. And like you, I get anything that's pre-recorded. I get it the day of, or sometimes the day before, usually the day of, usually an hour before service. And then we have it set up with times. Our producer is really strict with times. So no matter what, we know exactly when everything should go. So we'll have pre-recorded announcements. We'll have pre-recorded opening. We'll sometimes have pre-recorded music. Sometimes we'll do it live, which is much more dangerous than it sounds. And then the discussion, the sermon topic, that's all live. And we've had really good success, but like you said, it's a team effort. Even though we've whittled the team down a lot, it's still a team effort. In fact, one of the things I'd like to talk about before the end is how can we incorporate other people into the process to make them still feel like part of a team? Because eventually we're going to go back into a building and we got to rebuild this team up for people who haven't done anything for a while. Are there any disparate thoughts, excuse me, not disparaging, but disparate thoughts on the process? Anyone just strictly fully live?
We actually were doing live Zoom switching, all that stuff for the 12 weeks, like Alex was mentioning. Over the last couple of weeks, we actually switched over to a pre-tape format. We had some folks, you talk about bringing in some more people. Our folks actually saw, hey, these guys have been doing heavy lifting for the last 12 weeks. So they got some folks that do have camera equipment and going out, and they've been going around and shooting, different things. So like last week, we actually had Adventurer Day. All the different adventurers were preaching and participating, doing the law, all this stuff. a lot of editing went into it, but gave us a pretty solid break. So we weren't running everything. They more so taxed our ProPresenter computer more than anything.
They did all the editing.
They did all the editing. Now I will say this. We have certain standards for broadcast switching that we try to maintain. So that made life a little bit interesting. When you were dealing with clips that you weren't quite sure what was going to happen with them, so we had some fades with the music going into black, and then they kept going, right? So, we're still trying to work out some of those details and things, but I'm very happy to at least know that there's some folks that are trying to at least help us get out of some of the monotonous work and constant grinding to do, because producing that service on Zoom happened from Friday night, with the pre-call, doing everybody's testing, everything like that, making sure everything worked again in the morning, getting all the roll-ins right, all this stuff that you just had to really kind of get it. So at least with the pre-taped version now, everything is all taped. I mean, all of our announcements, openers and stuff, that all was always playing. But now all the elements are done. And hey, look, for what it's worth, they shot with a 4K camera, brought it down to 1080, but it looks great.
And I'll just throw in real quick, what you said about the broadcast standards is the story of our lives. And I'd be curious to see what you guys think of this, because this whole time period to me has been trying to figure out, where do you draw the line between broadcast standards and knowing that there are limitations, and time limitations, energy limitations, know-how limitations of people. And from a spiritual standpoint, how much does it detract from getting the point home if the message is delivered over a visual backdrop that is not ideal? You know what I mean? Like, where does that line get drawn? Because we ran into a number of times, because people have different views about this, but having to tell people, hey, you have to do this over again. But they spent hours trying to get the right take and get this different stuff right. And, they're stressed out and trying to do that in order to kind of uphold the quality that, at the end of the day, it is important to remove distractions from somebody watching, but then you're also sacrificing other things. So that to me is one of the big difficult things, especially because you can't just go to someone's house and show them how to do it or take over, or and that's been the issue, because you don't have physical access. So you are depending on people and trying to run through them over the phone or over whatever, try to tell them how to set up. They don't have equipment. And so that's been crazy. I'm curious to know what you guys think about that.
We can guess where I'm going to come out on this, Kyle. He smiles. The last 12 weeks have been hard for me to watch a lot of the, I won't call it any particular, video teleconference-based worship services. Has been difficult because there's a lot of things you can't control and a lot of the look that you wouldn't accept otherwise, right? And I think we've taken, I guess, for us, it's been just on this call. I mean, just the time we've been live, we've taken like a good 6 or 7 hours just discussing how can we make it better. Now, we're in an odd situation. I mean, the reason we're doing this at all is because everyone's stuck at home. But there are things, I mean, there are things that we do for our professional clients that I believe that we should have no less of a standard for the church, right? So, and they're really easy things, like my camera here is on a box, so that a lot of the shots you've seen even the pastor do it, they put their laptop and you're looking up their nostrils. Not a good look, right? Mm-hmm. Literally a box that you could, just your extra Amazon shipment from whatever you bought because you didn't want to leave your house. Keep the box, put your camera on it. Something simple like that. Turning your camera away from your window so your window gives you natural light and you're not silhouetted, right? Ordering a $15 microphone off of Walmart.com or off of Amazon or what have you. right? They're really simple things that you can do to make it better. Sometimes you can't get the equipment, but at least simple things to make it look better. Just the way you frame it. You know, you can get on to a Zoom call before, you know, the critical moment and say, hey, that's way too much headroom, or could you angle it differently? Or, you know, there's a lot of distracting stuff in your background. You know, there's a book that you probably don't really want to display to your worship audience on your bookshelf, that sort of thing, right? You know, some art that, you know, there are practical things that you can do that don't take a lot of time. But on the flip side, I've seen people take an inordinate amount of time doing editing, trying to get it perfect. And like everything in life, you have to strike a balance, right? Because at the end of the day, the most important thing is getting the message out. So getting the message out and taking away as many distractions as possible, to me, is more important than having a pretty picture and everyone's too tired to enjoy it, or you burn out your AV volunteers.
See, I got to give a shout out to our producer, Sheldon Kennedy. He sort of rules with an iron fist. In fact, I just spoke to him, and we're definitely going to have him on the show for part 2 of production, because there's no way we're going to cover all of it in one day. But one of the things that he does that's really good is whomever he asks to do anything, he gives them a standard ahead of time. So he doesn't wait until he gets back the footage and says, no, we have to do this over. He gives them, your phone has to be in 16:9, it has to be horizontal, not vertical. You have to make sure you have good audio. Listen to it again when you're done recording it to see if you find it acceptable. Because if you don't, nobody else will. And he has gotten very good results by talking to people we would consider pure amateurs. We're talking about people who have no interest in AV whatsoever. But he has gotten really good results in people doing things inside, people doing things outside, because he gives them the rules up front. So there's no surprises.
This is a conversation?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
But you see, like I said, he rules with an iron fist. So he is able, and he has the backing of church leadership. If something doesn't reach a certain standard, it just won't go on. And if you look at our productions, they have been really well done.
Kyle, was your question, is the instruction or the guidance verbal, or is there a template or some kind of document that's shared? Was that your real question?
That was the question, because we have done that and maybe not had the time to do all of the verbal, and everything is laid out in the document that we have sent to everyone, but people don't read it.
Yep.
Don't read it.
Reading is hard. It's hard. I mean, the thing is, when we did it, we gave written instructions, and I went and found a 3-minute video on YouTube, and I was like, watch the video. People still got it wrong. And it's just like, I mean, the thing is, it's one of those things, if you have the time to build a relationship and really kind of, I think if you set up standard, it definitely helps. You kind of have to meet people where they are. And I think your mileage varies depending on how many hats you're wearing. If you have a dedicated producer that it's their business to be in those people's business and to hold them to that standard, and they know what to expect, it's easier, as opposed to trying to be the technical guy that's trying to explain it to them. And they're like, well, I don't understand the words you're using. And you're like, okay, fine. You know, I legitimately think it's probably a spiritual gift at that point. If they ever made spiritual gifts again, they should probably be like explaining media production to lay people. Like, that's a spiritual gift. Find a way. There's got to be a thing, right? Like, yeah. I'm being a little bit, you know, I'm playing around with it and joking a little bit, but seriously, it's one of those things to encourage people, but also give them constructive feedback that actually helps them be better in producing this. I think it's definitely one of those things.
So I'm going to brag on Kyle with that, Alex. You're absolutely right. And it's funny that you don't do verbal in-person interaction for instruction, Kyle, because you're very, very good at it. Now, to give you some background, Kyle and I have worked together for some time, and I hired Kyle for one of my biggest clients at the time, who was AT&T. And the way Kyle interacts with especially my, if you want to call them premier clients, has been absolutely excellent. He's extremely personable and comes across, he'll give you the instruction without you making feeling dumb or inadequate. Is very good at it. So that is your spiritual gift, Kyle. I mean, you do it when we're out there in the big leagues. Don't do anything less with your church. You're good at it.
I appreciate that. I've never heard that from Colin before. So this is a good time for some new information.
Raise your rates. Raise your rates.
That should be a discussion. How much do you charge for your AV services, and do
Oh,
you feel
Lord.
valued?
I do appreciate that, and I think it goes back to kind of what Alex is saying, because in this situation, it's about hats and it's about time. You know, because how many hats and how much time do you have? Because I don't necessarily have time to do. I mean, I'm already out on the fringes as far as what time that I'm putting into it. Period. Just to do all the editing, to do all of the different things that we have to do. And I am open to, you know, and there's other parties in play. So letting people do what they do and delegating and different stuff like that, you know, is important. And I'm open to having those conversations and have here and there, but it just hasn't been the regular standard thing, you know? And as we speak, one of the things that I am thinking of doing is recording a short video, YouTube style, to go over those basics in general and as it relates to our specific stream, you know, to be able to send that out to make it easier to consume rather than the document that we sent out that, you know, has been, you know, dealt with in the way that it has. So.
I think that is one of the things that we should definitely collaborate on, because it's something each one of our churches could use. So to have us have a video like that we could disseminate to people would be crucial. I mean, it's one of the things that this church AV professional forum is supposed to be doing. So that's one of the things we can definitely collaborate on, or if individually one of us creates it, it's something that we can share.
I mean, that's literally, yeah. I mean, to your point, Robert, that I think that's really the essence of it. We're doing all of these things ourselves. We don't need to. We can collaborate and we can lessen the load by letting the people that are better in those areas do them.
That's it.
Alex, have you shared the video with the forum that you found, the instructional video on YouTube?
I have with some. I mean, if people want it, I can definitely share it. I'm open to that.
It needs to go in the notes.
Yep.
I was gonna, because I don't know how this whole thing's gonna work necessarily with the screen sharing, so I don't want to mess up Robert. Okay. We have our 7, you know, housekeeping notes that we usually send out with our email, you know, and one of those things is the YouTube video that we, you know, tell people, look, if you don't have time to read this list, then watch this, right? We try to hit all learning types because you got to be cognizant of that, right? Some people do better with instruction when you tell them something. Some people do better with instruction when they see it being done. And some people do better when they read it. And so you got to be cognizant of those things when you're working in that space. And that's usually what a very good producer and communicator is very capable of doing, like you said, Sheldon is doing over at your church. So, you know, when you have that effective person in the pipeline, right, that's one less stress that really we have to worry about as the technical people, because I'm just worried about trying to pull the strings with just getting the technical pieces done. Do I have this shot? Do I have this pre-tape? Do I have that? Right. And so if I don't have to think of the logistics from the people side and somebody's working with them, which we do have, you know, our communications director is being really, really good about that with our folks. You know, that makes or breaks the production in essence and how good the quality of things are going to come out. And so it's really important, you know, to think about these things. And if you don't have the staff, try to identify somebody in the church that might have that gift. And if you show them what to do, that should take the load off in some kind of way. Right.
So you guys have been focusing a lot. Oh, you want to say something? Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, before the call started, Carol was talking about the visiting my church, and he saw their pre-production, and I was thinking, our topic is live or pre-recorded. I think the prospect of having pre-recorded content really wasn't high on our radar before the pandemic, right? And I don't think it was high on the radar at the beginning of the pandemic. I think reality and human resources set in and said, hey, we're kind of burning people out. We're kind of trying to do the same live thing we do every week, and it's not sustainable with a small crew, right? But going back now, our churches are starting to either open outright or they're letting more people into the sanctuary. What's that going to do for our productions? Because, of course, if we have playback, most people don't want to sit in the pews and watch a video. But it's a very useful, and you disagree. Well, talk about that.
I don't disagree, but I think this is one of the things that made what we do at Brinklow, the transition was easier, because Sheldon had started that process. Now, it wasn't a majority of the service, it was just announcements. So he would pre-record all the announcements. What this was cutting down on was the endless, someone gets up there, grabs a microphone, and just starts yammering on into something that's not even the topic. And so we realized that announcements was going from, it's supposed to be about 5 minutes long. Sometimes it was 30 minutes long for 3-4 announcements. So to cut that out, he started to pre-record all the announcements. But he was so innovative with it that people were loving that time. It was 5 minutes long, and it was moving, it was excited. So people did get used to, hey, this time is going to be different than the live time. But once again, we're talking about someone with a gift. This wasn't given out to someone else who their ideas dried up in 2 weeks and that was it. He did it for 52 weeks out of the year.
Yep.
Now, just a technical thing before you go on. I keep getting notices. That's why you keep seeing me turn to my computer. I keep getting notices from YouTube that it's not getting enough data. So I think people that are watching are kind of getting a choppy experience.
Okay.
So for those who,
go ahead.
So, we might have to repost this later, cut this little section out, and because I know you're recording offline, but just giving you a heads up on that.
No, thank you. Usually I'm facing this way, so I get to see all of that information. But with my back to it today, it was difficult.
See, live troubleshooting, folks.
Yeah, this is live production. This is the difference between pre-recorded and live. So give me 2 seconds. Y'all talk amongst yourselves.
So, I mean, look, we talk about pre-tape stuff and all that. Like last week's service, we had to run that. But the interesting caveat to all of this was we actually had a thunderstorm coming in around when the service was about to go live. That made me nervous. And I actually had to shut all of the equipment down and get everything battery backed up. Right. So I had to run, go to my little IT closet, plug into the surge protection, because in my studio where I'm sitting right now, I've got my main computer and all my drives and stuff on the actual protection that I have in the room. But I didn't have enough for the extra equipment that I've had to bring in as we've, had to host the streaming from my house. Mm-hmm. So, when you're thinking about this stuff and trying to run it and run the videos, I'm like, well, that computer goes down, that's it, right? So I was like, well, got to make sure I protect that thing, which I should have done anyway. But, these are the things we're doing when we're scrambling, trying to put this stuff together just to make the stuff happen.
I mean, to be fair, though, it's not like we were planning to, have to stream the service with a pandemic and, triple or quadruple the number of computers in the, in the space and actually do that. I mean, if anybody saw that coming, then kudos to them, because most of us.
So two quick comments about that. First is I had been thinking about that, and periodically when I'm doing the stream, I have the video set up on another laptop playing at the same time, so that if something were to happen to my first computer and I have my stream key set up, then I can just basically just start streaming from the other computer and the feed hopefully would just show up in that way. So I haven't done it every time, but that was my thought, just being on a desktop. It's on battery backup, but you never know, like the computer could just update suddenly and then you'd be messed up. But
how you feeling, Robert?
Well, I mean, your conversation is perfect because remember, I told you guys on our last meeting when we talked about power, that the day before, on a Thursday night, a storm came through and took out some of my equipment. Now, luckily, this was my equipment. I was able to go to the church and use some of the church's equipment, which is still here. But what I recognized is, and this is great for when we try to do new things, sometimes we should test them out first. This was a case where
Sometimes.
The storm came through and my throughput for my uploads is much worse than it was before. The storm did something to degrade my my upload. So it should be fine now. We apologize for any mistakes. We'll definitely reload it. But because my upload speeds were lower, I had to lower the bit rate. I don't want to hijack the conversation, but you guys are talking about something that's crucial in terms of having your setup equipped to do what it is, whether it's live or pre-recorded. How much duplication do you think is necessary? Now, I could tell you to do a live show where we actually have switching takes a lot of equipment. I have switcher, a console, 4 monitors, 4 laptops just to do one church production. How could I make that redundant? You're talking about $12,000 worth of equipment. What are some ways we can do, whether you're doing pre-recorded or not, to have some redundancy there?
I'll take a stab at that. Go ahead, Kyle.
I was just gonna before you do that, I was just gonna finish my last point.
Okay, go ahead.
That redundancy that I talked about with the laptop is one thing, but for these reasons, we've been considering the Premiere options on YouTube and Facebook, because that takes away that element to a degree. Because if you get it uploaded there, then it's all on their end. You know, my whole internet could just die that day and the thing is going to stream. You know, the downside that we're looking at is it puts an automatic countdown that looks a little funky on there. But it would alleviate all of that kind of tense situation where it's live, I'm here, nothing's probably going to go wrong. But if the smallest thing, if I accidentally hit stop on the thing, then everyone's going to know, you know what I mean? It's right there. And that's one way to me to possibly circumvent if you are pre-recorded and you just have a video clip that you are putting up. And
okay, now Facebook, flesh that out, Kyle, because that's an excellent point, but not everyone knows what that feature is.
You want me to explain it?
Yes, please.
So Premiere on Facebook and on YouTube, they both have a Premiere option. Premiere is basically, it's a video that is presented as if it were live, but it's pre-recorded. So you have all of the same chat features. You have some type of tag that it's not the same like live tag, but it's that same like red looking thing, but it just says Premiere on it. And it's playing, you can't skip ahead in the video, you can go backwards and it plays it at a designated time. So if you start the video, it's gonna play it straight through. People are able to comment on it. You still have the same views and things like that. And it goes through to the end. As soon as it finishes at the end, then it's saved as if you just uploaded the video or as if you had just streamed it live. So the advantage is you get to just upload it ahead of time, put in all the details, put in the date that you want it to start, and it does everything else pretty much for you. The downsides, I guess, are probably fewer than the upsides. Some people have had issues with the stream on YouTube. Maybe like something gets out of whack and it's the audio and video are off, but that could be user dependent. There's a few people that have commented on that, but to me, all of these issues that come with live. And again, this does not address Robert's question of if we are live switching, how do you make that redundant? But as far as having a pre-recorded video that's done ahead of time, that alleviates most of that stuff. If you can stomach the countdown that YouTube puts in that you cannot change.
Yeah, I mean, I've used that feature to try and do something. I didn't have the most success with it, having never done it before, but I've been supporting a youth group, and they were trying to say, let's take the day off, let's join the social justice movement and, be involved in that. Let's take the Saturday afternoon off. And it's basically a way of doing like a movie premiere. It's the same concept. It is very nice in that sense. And I think there are a lot of advantages for it, for sure. The ironic thing is it was supposed to be a quote unquote day off, but you still have to have someone be there to make sure that it runs properly. Because if it doesn't, and then that person usually ends up being the one with the most technical background and proficiency with the software or the technology, and that typically ends up being this guy or the person in charge. So that's kind of how that rolls. But as far as speaking to redundancy, getting a full redundancy is difficult for Rob's query and his question. I think you can get redundancy in having a fallover. We have a setup configured, but if I wanted to go and say, oh, I have a failure here, and I determine that there's a single point failure, like if my switcher goes down, can I get a topology that works, that bypasses the switcher to get something? It's not going to be the same level of quality, but can I get something that will at least be passable? If I have a secondary switcher, but it has lower capability, can I patch that into my system and get something that runs maybe 4 inputs instead of 7? Is that doable? You get a little creative. That's one way of getting a redundancy without having your full capability. And it doesn't feel great, but at least you can run your production. Because I had to do that. I was trying to do something where I was live switching, and we decided that it wasn't great. So, we switched back to me just providing information inside of the Zoom calls that I was in. And that worked fine for us, where the backup was actually pushing the stream instead of from where I was, pushing the stream from the Zoom caller's laptop straight to YouTube. There are downsides to it, but in terms of other things people are doing, it's like, well, we're on par with what everybody else is doing. So that's a redundancy.
You picked up a piece of equipment, Colin?
I did. So little switchers, there we go. Great for backup. This one is a, 6-channel? Yeah, this is a 6-channel switcher, right? But it's really, really small. And I've never used it, mainly because it is a backup. If everything crashes, dies, what have you, at worst, if you don't have a router, you go and you just unplug it from one and plug it into the next, right? Start with the first one, start streaming on your first camera and get more angles as you go along, right? But in this day and age, this thing I purchased as a backup to my switcher, and it costs more than that, which is like the hottest switcher on the market, right? And its little brother is $300. So you've probably seen people that have kind of like double stacked their little ATEM minis, and one goes down, you have the second one. They're that inexpensive that you can do that. But even if you have
yeah, the ATEM that you were talking about, someone basically demonstrated the fallover capability for that. So you can, for like YouTube in particular, you can push to a secondary stream and you can send the second feed as your primary is going. So if it loses the primary connection, it'll switch over within a couple seconds, depending on what's going on with their receiving up there. So.
Yeah, so when you set up, let's use YouTube as an example, and Akamai does the same thing. It's a little more difficult in some other platforms, but they pretty much have an A published point and a B published point, right? So you can stream at the same time, and it's getting both streams. If one goes down, it'll switch to the next. The only problem with that is, where is your failure, right? Like if your failure is a camera, it'll fail on both streams. If your failure is electricity, you're kind of done until you get a laptop and a wireless modem or something like that. Or, my favorite backup, right?
Yeah.
Because it has the
pinch.
computer, it has the camera, it has the software, and it has the internet connection all in one, right? I always have on any production my publishing points either already preset in an application that will stream out, or I have it in a little notepad app that you can easily cut and paste your stream key and the publishing point into your app and send it out. Fortunately, I've only had to do that once, but it works. Power goes, you got a battery, all right? Everything you have is in this one package. This is expensive, but most people already have one, so you can always repurpose it.
The other area where sometimes you might need redundancy is with your network connectivity. Now, I have Comcast. I've had Comcast at this location for 15 years. There are a couple of reasons why I didn't move over to Fios when they came in, though they have a technically superior product. One of it is the enemy you know. So you just stick with the enemy you know. The problem is once COVID came about and now we're doing more from the house, you start to see the limitations of Comcast. Because I get 325 down, and on a good day, I get 12 up. It's a far cry from 100 down, 100 up. I've spoken to their business line. They have no guarantee. So for 3 times as much money, I can get 300 down and 30 up. Once again, there's no guarantee. And what I don't understand is it's the same exact line I have coming in. They're not coming out to run a new line or even new equipment. So what I did was go ahead.
No, you're about to demonstrate, but really quick, I think that's the tyranny of commercially available internet across the country. It's a big problem. It's only come to light now that so many people are going upstream, but go ahead.
Yep.
So what I did was I found, and I've tested out a couple of different pieces of equipment. This is this is called the MoFi. I don't know how to describe it because there's so many different names for it, but it uses a SIM card and uses your wireless company's, thank you, cellular data. I couldn't remember it. But what made this important is when Comcast did go out with me right before a service, I was able to switch over to this. Now I only get 30 down, but I get 30 up. So upload speed to me is almost more important, even though I'm bringing in a lot of different Zoom feeds. They're not using up that much bandwidth. I do have to tell the rest of the people in the house, shut down some of the extra equipment. But this is a redundancy that I've found to be really useful. And this is actually from MoFi Network, MoFi Network, whatever. I don't know how to pronounce these things, but I've found this to be amazingly useful. It's just $25 extra a month for my SIM card. And it has been a good piece of redundancy. So it wasn't a fair question, to be honest, because when we think about our churches, how redundant are our churches?
Not very.
I mean, if the soundboard goes out in church, that's it. Service is over.
Acapella. I'll sing acapella.
Yep.
Bring out the hymnal.
Give him a bullhorn and tell the pastor to shout from up front.
Yep.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, that's the end all be all right there. I mean, thankfully, if you have a digital system, right, you get and you have like a broadcast sound and a front of house sound. If they have the same console, like at Collins Church, same footprint, then you're fine. You can take your broadcast mix board out to the front of house guys and they'll, make the adjustment and do whatever they got to do. I'm not saying you do that during the service though.
A frantic 20 minutes, 30 minutes, hour, but
no,
wow.
but the thing is that, you try to think about these things and build it into the system. I mean, one of the things we did at the church, especially with Dante, is that we have the redundant network set up intentionally with different switches and even different power source. So if one breaker blows, at least we're on another, right? And
that's a valuable point, by the way. Redundancy means nothing if you don't have redundant power supply.
Yep.
You can have redundant everything, and if you don't have the power, you're done.
Right. So, I mean, even the way that my studio here is built, the outlets actually jump from one to the next. So in other words, instead of them being wired from one to the next, to the next, to the next, it actually goes from one, jumps over the next one, and goes to the following one. Right. So that way I don't have the same power draws going on, on the same circuit, and then I'll blow a circuit breaker. So, when you're using equipment and you're thinking about this thing, you can go deep down the rabbit hole real fast, as you can probably tell this conversation went with this.
Yes. I apologize.
No. But it's important. People got to think about things. I mean, if we're going to look at redundancy from the sense of it, I'm actually operating on my number 2 option, not my main one. We have an ATEM hardware piece here, but I didn't have the appropriate switcher scalers to get my Macintosh computers into the Blackmagic stuff, directly. Right. So I had to think about ways how we were going to deal with it. Thankfully, we were able to get a hold of an ATEM Mini that got rid of that whole HDMI issue that we had with the Macs. So, these are things that you may not think of when you're, trying to scramble to get equipment. And when I hit that roadblock, I was like, oh, see, but now I have the switcher scalers that I wasn't able to get a hold of when the whole thing hit. And now it's my redundant setup. So basically, if my little ATEM Mini, were to blow up and Alex has got hit by lightning, I'm not wishing that on anybody.
Why? Why would you say that? Come on, man.
Storming outside. Then at least we have that box sitting there and it's ready to go. And I can get it hooked up and we can have something running. So these are all things that, as we're putting stuff together, right? Yeah, you want to get the main goal. Yes, I need to get this out, right? But you have to think about the alternate avenues. If your main way of doing stuff goes down. I mean, even with the pre-tape stuff that we're doing, yes, I have the Pro Presenter computer here that's running everything out. This time I didn't do it, but I will have the videos redundant, and the live stream software that we're using to do our stream actually allows for video playback. And I can actually load the videos up into that, and I can switch between 2 video feeds, and I can play back videos, as I need to there. There was 17 of them this last service. That was going to be a bit much to load those up. But, but the thing is like, if you just had the one file and everything was all together, right, then playback is easy between the 2 different machines. So that's my 2 cents.
And once again, I apologize. I didn't mean to hijack it. So in our last few minutes, we started a bit late, Colin. Stop looking at the time.
I was looking to see if there's any comments, actually.
Okay. In the last few minutes, let me bring it back to, let's do an informal poll. Which would you rather do? And I'll state from the very beginning, I love the feeling of doing something live. There's an adrenaline rush for me. I've worked in tape, I've worked live to tape, whatever. I love live because for me, it's really exciting.
Glutton for punishment.
Yeah, it's a glutton for punishment. Yes, it is, because mistakes are amplified. Because, once you make a mistake, even trying to correct that mistake, you can make a mistake. And then, what do they call it? The sand pit?
It snowballs.
Quicksand. But let's take an informal poll. Which would you rather have on a regular church day? Pre-taped, live, or a mix? We'll start with you, Carell.
I mean, I'm in favor of a hybrid, right? So I'd go for the mix. And the reason is this, right? The praise and worship sets are very, very hard to nail pre-tape, right? Unless you have everybody in the same room and stuff, singers may have a hard time getting all the pitches right or whatever the case is on there. So for the music element, and especially since you're also got the excitement of everybody, kind of feeding off of each other's energy. I know Kyle knows a lot about that, with a group, right? You feed off of that, and that kind of helps convey a certain excitement to the crowd, to which they get a chance to feed off of. And I think it enhances the worship. the sermon, the pastor's like, you know, keying in on people and talking to them and calling out their name and making it a personal thing and appeal to them, right? And then there are other things where you just don't need to be having it. Like you said, the announcements don't need to be 30 minutes, okay? If you can get it down to 5, great, right? Because there's certain places I think where we waste a lot of time in the services where when you have that content prepackaged, it locks it in and you keep moving, right? And so I'm a fan of the hybrid stuff, you know, to a certain extent, you know, and that's where I would sit.
Colin?
Colin?
Alex.
Oh,
Oh,
Alex.
I thought he said Colin.
I said Colin.
Yeah.
He said
Or did
Colin. Man, we're getting to that time now. I guess we need to,
Honestly, if I'm on duty and volunteering, I want it all to be live, or else I'll probably fall asleep.
What? Okay. Didn't you just call
I've
me a
been doing
glimpse?
live for, well, how many pre-tape things have we done together? 0, right?
Zero, you're right.
Yes, I'm a live guy. You know, I don't like cinematography. I don't like doing 50 takes on something. I hate editing.
Wow.
I'm live. I've been doing live for a generation. So, you know what? You know, I'm not this calm because of this calm because I do live, and jumpy people can't do live. They'll kill themselves, right? It's just, you know, it's not the temperament to have if you get rattled easily to do any kind of live production. But that being said, the other thing is, I think just in general, and you've heard me say this before, most churches, especially churches that follow the African-American tradition, are very sound heavy. Usually they spend a lot of money, like 80% of the budget or higher, in really good sound equipment. You have a great mixing console, you have great speakers, you know, right? And the video is an afterthought. That being said, the playback equipment is usually very bad. And you're kind of doing this and crossing your fingers, hoping that whatever software you have, because no one that I know has invested in any robust, right, hardware-based video playback, is like, will it crash? Will it crash? Will it play it? Will it stutter? Will it, right? I mean, you get by with ProPresenter, right? Rather use Playback Pro Plus, but even then, every time Apple like kills Playback Pro, and it takes them months to get caught up again, right? So a new version comes up, it'll break. They'll get it right. It's the most stable thing, but once an update comes, Apple put up an update, it'll break. And I don't think most volunteer bases can handle that. So Playback Pro Plus or Playback Pro, probably not the thing for the church market. And you have really expensive software that also works, you know, the kind of the video server type software that works well too, but probably outside the budget of most churches. So I think the prospect of playing, let me tell you, tape was really good. Tape was really reliable. You press that triangle play button and the thing played. Early tape, you know, you always had the possibility of jamming, but somewhere between jammy tape and a complete disk-based or SSD workflow, tape got really good and really reliable. Right. I'm not advocating we go back to tape, but right. But I mean, you have some good SSD-based playback stuff that's affordable. Data Video has some, Blackmagic has some, AJA has some, right? Churches should buy it and use it. And then I feel a lot better about it.
Can I ask a quick question to clarification? Sure. When you talk about playback, are you saying like a pre-recorded video and playing that back on the computer or onto the stream? And how are you relating that with ProPresenter? I'm not familiar with what process you're talking about.
Yeah, so many people, the base use of ProPresenter is really just, you know, they could have used PowerPoint and done the same thing. They're just putting up like full screen worship lyrics with a background. You know, some other people are doing more with ProPresenter than calling up backgrounds in Bibles, right? They're using them for their lower thirds. Some, with the latest version, are using it to stream, and some use it to play back video, whether it be background video just as environmental type things, or they're using for iMag, or they're using video to actually advance the worship message. So it has some kind of thematic or illustrative thing in that video that matches the sermon, right? There's a myriad of uses for it, right? Well, I'm talking about playing back, say, a sermon or playing back praise and worship or any pre-recorded part of the content.
In a hybrid, scenario where some is live and some is played back?
In any scenario.
Okay.
In any scenario, even if like just live worship, say, you wanted to show a 5-minute clip from a guest pastor and everyone's watching it, what have you.
Yep.
It really is iffy playing it back from a computer, right? Whether it be OBS, that's really iffy because you're using it now as a playback machine and you're using it to encode, and you might even be using it to switch, right? Unless you have a very robust machine, something is likely to fail eventually, right? Some computers are built very well. They have really good GPUs on them, what have you, or they're purpose built to do that. But playing back from a computer isn't necessarily the greatest thing unless it was purpose built and tuned to do that.
I was asking because I haven't had any issues. The setup that I figured out with VLC and with OBS, the playback hasn't been an issue for me. I haven't been doing hybrid stuff where I'm having to switch between, something live or playing something here and then put in this 5-minute video clip. In this scenario, it's just been the full video, but the playback has been the least of the problems for me. That, the day of playback, not a problem. All the prep and the editing and the back and forth with people has been the big issue. Once it's there, I haven't had a problem with it.
Okay, that's really
and you've
good.
Been lucky.
Yeah. Alex, I'll come back to what you said, Kyle, after you give your final thought on that.
I am a proponent of live. I feel like I should say pre-recorded just so we can have a vote that way, but I actually prefer live. Most of the things that I do are actually live in terms of my real media capacity. I also do have these nitpicky tendencies that make editing very problematic for me because I will spend, you get a lot of the way, you get 80% of the way most of the time. It's that last 20% that there's a joke in some of these things that you never actually finish it. You just get it to 90% and you run out of time. That's one of those things. Sometimes I have that tendency, but I think live music works better because of the things that Karel mentioned. And I think it's easier to adjust to changing circumstances and dynamics that are important in the church setting when you're able to do things live. I think there's something to be said about a well-structured service. I think there's live with limits, but that's another discussion.
And Kyle, our guest, who's welcome to come back anytime.
Every time.
Well, I'm glad you came to me last because I didn't have an answer at the beginning. It's a little difficult because to me there are certain factors to consider that play a part in what my answer would be, because I think, and some of those factors have to do with time and with resources, and to minimize time and resources, if you can do it live, then to me that minimizes a good 70% of the time that's spent editing, gathering video clips, people redoing stuff, all of that. And what you miss out on in things that may go wrong, I think the scales tilt towards, by and large, people will forgive the stuff that goes wrong, or they won't even remember it, for most of the time. So to me, the time investment put into it, even though the product that you're able to get when it's pre-recorded is very crisp, crisp to a degree, given the circumstances that we talked about before. But for that reason, I think I would prefer live. If you have the resources and the people and the, just time to do stuff ahead of time, And again, I guess we're talking about even a hybrid where some people can go to the church to record the music, and then that could be, you know, put in and stuff like that. If you have access to all that and you have a ton of people to do the editing, then the product that you get from pre-recorded is just going to be better, you know. But to me, it's like, at what is it worth it? At what point is it worth it to put in that, to get that extra quality bump out of it? Because again, to me, if you can get 80% of the way and have the message delivered spiritually in a way that's not distracting, and you have the bumps in the road, I would take the bumps to have the extra time to be able to dedicate to other important things. That's just, I think that's my initial take.
So believe it or not, that's basically 4 for live, well, 3 for live and 2 for hybrid. That's amazing. No one really jumped and said, I want everything pre-recorded. You guys are crazy.
I mean,
Thank you.
I will say it's a lot of work. Like, honestly, I guess this is the thing, right? We've gotten this chance to take a break in the sense that we've moved to pre-recorded content. Someone else is doing the legwork. And when they first said it, I was saying, it kind of was like, are you sure? And it wasn't trying to be mean. It was legitimately this question of, is it sustainable? Yes, you can do a great product week 1. Yes, you can do a great product week 2. Can you continue to do that week 3? And unless you have a person being an institution, and you talk to the point of redundancy, Robert, and this is kind of where I was getting with this discussion in the first place for pre-recorded content. Because people have this expectation of a standard here, what happens when it's no longer sustainable because it takes a physical toll on the people producing it? And this is my point with this whole discussion. We have to have the place and an understanding of what it takes, because people, I don't think know that when it comes to 3 minutes of video, there can be 3 hours of editing behind it. It's not that simple. Unless, I mean, if you let the quality slide a little bit, that gets better. And it's not always that bad, but you have to look at it and is it sustainable? And my whole point with this is, you know, I like to push on this little education part of it is, so what do we do from here? How do we get to the point where we have enough of a workforce that we can spread out the labor here so it can actually be sustainable? Because if we're going to keep doing this pre-taped content or doing these types of productions, at some point, we're going to have people that are able to execute and do some of the things that we are doing. Because God forbid, if some of us go down for whatever reason, I'm sure there will be someone to replace us. But are people willing to understand what goes into getting to these levels of production? And that's kind of where I wanted to go with this, because we can do it for a time, but it is not sustainable. And people need to understand that. And that's kind of where I was going with this discussion, because I think we've talked about 3-man skeleton crews because of necessity, because of trying to limit exposure. There have been good reasons, but as we go back to whatever this new normal is, I think the discussion needs to be framed in what is going to be sustainable.
You know,
and I'm off my soapbox.
We're going to have to come back for a part 2 because there really is a lot we didn't cover. And I thank you for bringing Kyle in, because Kyle, you're coming back for part 2, right?
What's the date?
We haven't decided yet. But
Hopefully.
we definitely have to do a part 2, because I think the nuances of what you just discussed is really what's key. Things have changed. Will they remain changed, or what is church going to be like moving forward? If we're getting used to pre-recorded, what is that going to be like when everybody starts to go back to work and people don't have as much time at home? Because that's the way it was before, where you're trying to get people on a Friday night and you have editors up till 2:00 in the morning on our day of rest so that they can have something ready for Saturday. So there's a lot that we're going to have to discuss ahead of time, because the expectations, what you're talking about is what are the expectations of the people going to be when we get back, and can we meet those expectations? And who's going to make that decision?
Yep.
And there's an interesting nuance that you brought up in one of our previous conversations, or like a prep for this, was because we have delivered in some of these situations that haven't been the best, and we have kept the standard high, have we done ourselves a disservice? And that is a philosophical question that I'm not trying to answer. I'm just asking rhetorically, have we done ourselves a disservice? Has our excellence been our undoing?
There's a Bible text that answers that. Do everything as if unto the Lord. But I still think we're going to have to. We'll wait till part 2. We'll wait till part 2.
I'm nodding rhetorically.
I thank you guys for joining us again. Once again, the lateness, we started a few minutes late. I will take full credit for that. My camera went out right before I started speaking. Little power blip. These things happen.
Well, one thing, we got one comment. It says, South Caribbean media, if you're putting up your product on YouTube, it is better to go pre-recorded.
Wow.
And mind you, South Caribbean media is my dad, and today is his birthday.
Oh, happy birthday, Dad.
Happy birthday.
So,
But at least he didn't call me out personally.
I don't know. The world has changed so much in just 3 months. We're legitimately doing things I never thought we would do. And I have to say thank you to all the AV technical people in all the churches for what they've been able to pull off. Because let's be honest, anything we've been able to do is a miracle. Plain and simple. Anything we've been able to do, sometimes without the backing of our church. I don't have that problem. We have full backing from our church. But I know I've heard some of the struggles that people have had with church officials saying, we want to do this. And you're like, we just can't.
Can't do it.
No.
So.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. And I won't go there, but I definitely think that there have been some people that have, instead of a rotating crew, that skeleton crew has really stepped up and been there week after week. And a lot of folks are sitting at home enjoying the fruits of a really small group of labor. And I think that not just us on this call, I think when we get back into our churches, that we need to collectively thank the people who have kept the worship community, worship experience together for a lot of people. I've seen everything from people just gathered around for Sabbath school and a sermon over a Zoom call. Nothing, just whatever you had, a Zoom call that has been engaging, to incredible, presentations on 100-foot video walls with virtual choirs and everything in between. And I know that those people that put together the Zoom call, those people who did the editing for the virtual choir, they all spent a lot of time either figuring out a technology they weren't used to, weren't comfortable with, scheduling people, training them, coaching them through how to use a webcam, or some people hadn't even thought of using their computers or tablets or what have you for a long time. It's really been a sacrifice, and I think we need to thank and recognize those folks in the field that have been doing it for the past 3 months.
I have one monkey wrench to throw in real quick. I know this is the very end. This is a bad thing to do. But one thing that you said, Colin, about all these people that are doing all these different things, the interesting thing to me is that we have access to all of them. I can watch the 100-foot video wall, or I can watch the small Zoom call Sabbath school right from my house, and everything in between. Mm-hmm. And my rhetorical question is, does everyone need to be doing everything that they're doing, or can the larger church be joined in different ways to be able to cross? Since we're not physically having to be in the same spaces, why do we need 1,000 different individual streams when we could have less than that?
See what
I
happens.
think that was episode 1.
See what happens when you invite the new
It
guy.
was. We had a discussion in episode 1.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
we
I-
bring on these rambunctious guests, you know.
See,
But we should
Will John's tackled that one in pretty good depth.
Okay.
That very first episode we had, and did a really good job of breaking that one down.
Okay, fair enough.
Well, it's worth revisiting, or at least encouraging people to watch episode 1. Hopefully, it's not too cringeworthy.
And it was taped.
Oh, it probably is. I'm
Especially-
still on it, so yeah, it's probably pretty bad.
Gentlemen, thank you for joining us again. I can't even say joining me. This is a collective. Thanks for joining us again. And to all you viewers out there, we hope that this has been meaningful to you. There will be a part 2 without question. And we may revisit, Kyle, we definitely may revisit that question because there's some answers to it. And I don't know if all the answers are good ones. So we're going to be nothing if not honest. I've never understood that phrase, but we're going to be honest. Let's just say that. So thank you all very much. And once again, you see how production changes when I don't have my assistant. I didn't get to do as much switching, but thanks for joining us. And we hope to see you next time. We'll send out the advertising way early next time.
Yeah, right.
Listen, we all have full-time jobs. Today was a mess.
Hey, room for improvement. Room for improvement.
That's right.
It's fine.
That's right. All right, gentlemen. See y'all later.
All right.
Stream is off.